And so one of the things that stands out to me is that, as a child growing up, that I was used to making. And I think that's something that is really important to think about as far as creative individuals. I think it's important to learn through making. Often when I would work with my father, we would make tools to then create other things. So this is a belt grinder. And so a lot of times we didn't have the money to be able to, make the things that we wanted to. So we'd say, well, we'll make the tool that then makes the thing, the machine. And so this is a machine that you can, put a abrasive grinding belt on, and then you can shape metal with it. And so I kind of grew up with this DIY mentality. I worked a factory job when I was going through college, and I worked on an assembly line. And my father was the same way. He was a blue-collar worker at a cream factory. And I realized that, through my father's background, how he would come home and always have these side hobbies that he worked on. I realized, okay, it's because, when he's on that assembly line or working in that factory, he doesn't own the means of his own production. The man owns that. The machine owns that. And so I started to realize, wow, that's something that I need to kind of think about and tap into. So, one of the things that, growing up working with my father, I realized that, the moments when I was able to make machines or to play or to create tools, it was a time to play. And it was a time when there were no, very low stakes. And I think that's also important as creative individuals, that we have time to play, just to test out materials and things. So I took my first metalsmithing course and learned about jewelry and metalsmithing, specifically art jewelry. And I was interested in what I was seeing in the factory because I wasn't learning those skills that I saw as industrial processing, like machining, where we usually use a lathe or a milling machine to create things in a factory to produce things. That wasn't being used. It was all done by hand. And so I was interested, can I actually start to combine what I was seeing in the factory? I would go around and talk to machinists and say, what do you guys make when you go home? And they'd be like, are you crazy? We don't make anything. And I was like, well, I grew up with that. That's the way my father was. He applied what he knew at work to, what he did in some free time. So I think that's another important point as creative individuals. I think it's important to make connections between the things that you're engaging with in your life and try to tie those together with your creative acts. And so I started making these bracelets that were functional in the terms of being able to wear them, but then also they would dispense tape or have a second function. And so, again, this stemmed out of me working on the assembly line and working at the end of a line where you have to tape up boxes and a tape machine. And so I started to try to draw from the things I was seeing, clamps, clamping devices, and figure out how can I start to create these interesting objects. So one of the first things after I got done doing metalsmithing and jewelry specifically, I started being very interested in functional objects. And so this was the first pizza cutter that I designed and built. And this was something that, I thought, boy, this really spoke to me because it took my passion, some of my own personal interest, which was restoring motorcycles. I had grown up as a kid working on cars and motorcycles. And it was the first time where those kind of two worlds meshed. They matched together my personal interest with my creative work. And so Easy Rider, as it's called, basically stemmed from my interest in choppers, in chopper motorcycles, and that kind of attitude, that free spirit. And I thought, boy, wouldn't it be great if I could do this hubless design? You see so many industrial designers who draw hubless wheels, And so I thought, well, I'll design a pizza cutter that has this hubless wheel. And so all of this stuff was kind of new territory. I didn't know how to machine from working on an assembly line. I didn't know how to do those processes because I wasn't taught those in school. But basically there was this kind of innate need or desire to learn these new processes and to learn how these things worked. And I think that's another thing that I think people take for granted is that you in some ways a DIY attitude, you have to take that into consideration and think about how you can use knowledge and progress yourself. And so, I started looking at, again, going back to like these factory workers and what they did in their spare time when they went home. And I decided I was going to make a pizza or a chopper to go along because a lot of people look at pizza cutters and say, well, those aren't functional. How could you ever use this? Well, and I got this email. It's from this guy who's on Top Chef, on Bravo's Top Chef, named Mike Isabella. And basically, he said this and said, look at this new tattoo I got to celebrate my new store that I opened, my new restaurant I opened up. He said, can you make me a pizza cutter? I said, yes. So this is proof that if you follow your passion and your dreams, eventually someone will recognize it and say, hey, that's good, right? Another thing I think is really important is to draw inspiration from the places where you are working. This is the Kenilworth building that you're at. This was actually an old Ford factory originally, built for the production of cars, and it has had various other functions, but I love the fact that now it's not the manufacture of products, it's the manufacture or creation of creative individuals through dance, theater, music, and art. And so I have a studio space here. Unfortunately, the university gives me this space to be able to work, and I quickly filled it up with tools. And I started to do a little bit of 3D modeling when I was in college. And this is another thing I think was a really pivotal thing, is that at the time I didn't know what I was going to use 3D modeling for. I thought, well, it's a great way to visualize my work. And at the time, you didn't see very many people like doing anything other than like visualizations with it or animations. But at the time, I thought, boy, if I could just use it just to kind of visualize things three-dimensionally, that would really help me. Well, my point basically is that you never know when you're learning something new. You might not know at the time how you're going to integrate it into what you do, but it's very important to be able to just learn new things on a regular basis because eventually it will pay off. And so I started to look into computerized numeric controlled machining. So I actually purchased this little tabletop milling machine, and where you can take it and you can put a milling bit into it, and it will actually engrave on a surface of metal, or you can put a block of material into the machine, and it will subtractively carve away at it. And again, all of this was new knowledge. I didn't have the first clue how to actually go about learning this. But the thing is, there's so much information. We live in an age that is really, in a lot of ways, we've never lived in an age like we do now, where information is readily available. And so I was able to basically walk myself through learning CAD programs and CAM programs. CAM programs meaning how to machine things, how to send code to a machine to cut things out. And I was able to then translate that into material. And so, again, I think just coming back and learning something new and just not waiting for an expert to show up on your door to help you out is important. And so I started looking at a 3D printing, and I asked the school, could we buy 3D printers? And they're like, oh, that's way out of our price range. So I told a local company, we're thinking about starting a rapid prototyping lab. Could you give me some information? They said, well, you know what, we'll donate a couple of printers to you for a couple of weeks to play with. Great. So my students actually took advantage of this, and I took advantage of this and started printing some pizza cutters out. And so I started to really look at, what does this mean when we can start to send digital information across a long distance, and then someone else, if they have access to a printer, can print that. At the same time, I kind of started envisioning this space called the Digital Craft Research Lab, where we would combine traditional craft with current technology, and see what that what comes out of that mashup. And so we built a physical space. I'm fortunate that I've surrounded myself with other people who are as driven and as motivated as myself, meaning a lot of my graduate students and a lot of my undergrad students, and they've actually helped to build this space, which you would probably walk by. And so we have computers so we can do 3D modeling. We have machines that we've built, a CNC milling machine, router that we built. And I've started a program now that's called Digital Fabrication Design as a result. I've been interested in machines and how craftsmen used to create their own tools. They used to create their own machines to do their own work. And so I quickly became interested in the RepRap project, which if you don't know about that, it's a 3D printing, open source 3D printer where people share their designs and you're able to reproduce the printer by printing itself. And so I started, again, all this new knowledge. I had no clue where to start. But you get a circuit board, you get a heated bed that's also a circuit board, basically a hot glue gun, which is called a hot end, and then you hook this all together with basic hardware, and you're left with a machine that can basically draw layer by layer, and it's made from scratch or from 3D printed parts and hardware. Because the school wasn't going to buy printers, and so I said, we'll build our own. And so I started building these printers that could then produce parts, and I would make more printers, and my students would make printers. And so the printers started reproducing, having children. And so quickly I realized, boy, this is great because my students learn how this stuff works. And they learn to be able to be self-sufficient, self-reliant. When they leave, they're not dependent upon a lab or a school to be able to make their work. They can create their own work. And so they have a little desktop factory on their table at home. A project that you probably remember about recently was a project where I was starting to work with 3D printed prosthetics. And so you might say, well, how do you get from all that to that? To me, it's all related. It comes out of function. It comes out of making something one of a kind, like the pizza cutters, making something specific for someone, following your dreams and your passion to be able to create and learn new things. So I was contacted by Shay's family, and they asked if I could make a 3D printed hand for Shay for Christmas because she had seen a video of a robo hand that was put out by Robotics Industries. And unfortunately, I have one colleague, my colleague Adrienne Blair, in the Design and Visual Communication program here. And I talked to her because we're friends and we hang out, our families hang out. And I said, Adrienne, would you be willing to work with me on this project? I've been requested to be able to make this 3D printed hand. I really love what you do as far as your research into user-based design. And I said, will you work with me? And so, I'm very fortunate to have Adrienne to be able to collaborate with. And so my advice is to find those people that you feel comfortable with collaborating with and work with them. And so we made a hand for Shay, and we quickly realized, boy, Shay can use this to be able to, hold food as a clamping device when she cooks. She can swim with it to be able to get better motion. She can use it when she rides her bicycle to have good counterbalance. And pretty soon word traveled because we were working with a group called Enable, a global community called Enable, to create new designs, working with other professors and other professionals in healthcare as well, and collaborating. And I pretty soon realized that it's good to start communicating and speaking the language of other people. And so this is a little boy named Karuna from Brookfield, and we made a hand for him. This is Bella. She's from New Berlin. We made a hand for her. And my students started to actually collaborate as well. Several of them which are here right now. And they were able to help push the designs forward. We were able to make hands for even children who were not born this way, that had amputations. This is Evan. And Evan actually had a recent amputation. And he didn't want to wear a traditional prosthetic hand because of the way it looked. He didn't like the way it looked. And so we quickly found out that if a child's not going to wear a prosthetic, then it's not of any use. But as soon as he got this, he thought, boy, that's pretty cool. It looks cool. And there's this kind of cool factor that goes along with it. And so I never thought by engaging with my local village, and that's why I mentioned earlier the local village, it relates back to how I grew up. When I was a kid in a small farming community in Illinois, you helped out your neighbor. That's what you did. If you had a specific skill set, you gave freely. And so I started to realize that this would not have started without Richard Van As, who was actually a South African carpenter who had lost his fingers in an accident. And he had collaborated with Ivan Owen, who was a prop maker in Washington. And so Ivan and Richard gave their design freely. And I started to realize, boy, boy, this is pretty amazing. This is pretty special. Someone's willing to give their creative creation away for free to download. And they made this hand for Liam. And that's what Shay had originally seen. And so quickly I started to realize, boy, there's a wonderful community of people to collaborate if I just find them. And it's a global village that we're building here. We're taking people with different skill sets and we're combining them through Google Hangouts and Google Communities. And we're able to communicate and collaborate, and we're able to share. And so, again, to show you how broadly this global community stretched and how I could never envision this, I was contacted by a little girl from Inverness, Scotland, named Haley, and they sent me that drawing that they had traced, and they sent me a little beautiful pink plaster cast of her hand. And I was able to make 2 hands for her. She was actually featured on the BBC and showed her story, so it's the only, we've never met. And it was a way that I could actually create something for her. And it was also a way for my students to engage in giving their talents and their skills and their ideas. And so this has grown so much just through us being able to share our story, share our designs, share our creativity, and share our passion. And so the way that recently the collaboration has culminated is this is a hand that we've actually released as a group through Enable. This is called the Raptor hand. I designed the gauntlet section. Ivan Owen designed the fingers, so I've been working with Ivan. Peter Bingley designed the palm. And together we share our designs online through Google Hangouts. With a 3D printer, I was able to print the components they were sending me, through digital files. They were able to print mine, and we were able to combine and build that design and then to release to the public. We sent this out to the world and we said, we're having an event at Johns Hopkins Hospital. Everyone print as many hands as you can. You don't need to assemble them, just send the parts. Send them in different sizes, 100% scale, 110, 120, 130. And basically we'll have an event at Johns Hopkins Hospital sponsored by Dr. Albert Chi, who does neuro implants for prosthetics. Okay, but he's interested in this research that we're doing. And basically this is all sponsored this conference, and you can come teach prostheticists and families how to build their own hands. And so I was able to use our laptop and basically demonstrate with one of my students, Kayvon, who's here. And we were able to work with 30 families and their children who have affected hands. And they were able to learn how to build 3D printed hands in a matter of a couple hours. They were able to walk up and also basically like a shoe sizing event where they could stick their hand out and see which percentage scale hand they needed, so they got their bag of parts. And then we went through and showed them how to put these hands together. And this was a group that I had been working with, and with the Enable, this was a group of folks that I've been collaborating online. We had never met until this day. I had worked together for about a year before this, and it was an opportunity for us to connect and help out. We've continued this research. We're continuing to refine our designs. Still working with a group, still working with other ideas, looking at adaptive devices. And we're able to do things like this. We're able to now help Shay play the viola. We're able to help Karuna play the trumpet. We're looking at helping Evan to be able to hold a hockey stick. And we're starting to realize that here's an opportunity to create one-of-a-kind object for someone who's one-of-a-kind that has a special need. And again, we live in a time like no other, where we're able to harness the power of these machines and our creativity and our interests and our passions and combine it into something that actually makes a difference in someone's life. So I'll leave you with Shay and her performance, and I really appreciate everyone coming out to attend the talk. So I'll welcome you to ask questions.
So, what is the potential for a manufacturing renaissance? In the sense, that this was once the toolbox of the world, and now we don't even know the tools for the most part.
Yeah.
Does this have the potential of reviving, bringing factories not simply back to neighborhoods, but into our bedrooms and our garages?
I think it does. I mean, if you look back at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, you used to see a lot of articles, like how-to articles in Popular Mechanics on how to run a lathe, and they've gotten away from that. They're completely away from that. And so now it's just like the next kind of media thing that they kind of advertise. But I think in a lot of ways, that's what I see for my students. I saw as a student myself, when I got out of school, the resources were gone. They pretty much say, see ya, when you get your diploma. And so to me, I think it's a wonderful opportunity. If I teach my students how to be self-reliant and how to be creative and how to learn on their own, but then also learn how to speak the language of other people. And I think that's important. I found early on when I came here, I was very fortunate. I worked with a professor in architecture, Gil Snyder. He's actually, in some ways, what started this, because Gil is an architect. What am I? Am I a craftsman? Am I, a metalsmith? Am I an artist? Am I a designer? I don't know. I don't even know. But what was interesting is that, he had a vocabulary that he spoke, and I had a vocabulary I spoke, and it was the same in a lot of ways, but it was different. And so it was an opportunity for us to be able to connect. And I realized then that we have to give our students the ability to speak to different types of people and to collaborate, and then also to be able to start their own desktop factory in a way to be able to be creative through making. And I think we are on the verge of a revolution that's resulted really from information age, and then also the maker movement, DIY, all of this stuff has kind of created the perfect storm for us to be able to make creative ideas come to fruition. So I hope that happens.
Really like the hand, we really like the pizza cutter. Really cool what you're doing with the hand. Why no pizza cutter hand?
You should do it. Let's work together. I think it's a great idea. I mean, I think that's a type of adaptive devices we're looking at. Things that in some ways where there's an opportunity here to seize an opportunity for those children or those adults or whoever that's interested. I'd like a device I can strap on that's low cost, affordable, and I can then do this specific function with it. It's not like we have to make a hand that can do everything that ours does. That's what I learned early on. We don't have to make it look like our hand. We can actually do something else that's more interesting in some ways to the individual, So man, first kid that comes to me and says, yeah, I want a pizza cutter, I'm all over that, yeah. I'll give you credit though. We'll work together, yeah. Anybody else? Yeah.
So what propels motion?
Yeah, the hand is very low tech. You'll be surprised, and we can pull some out of the cases that we have over there, but basically, it's the wrist movement that makes it actually grasp. So when you bend your wrist, it grasps. And it's the cables that are in it, you need cables to make the fingers spring back. Those are basically elastic string from Michaels for doing beading, for stringing beads, right? And then the cable that actually is tensioned to be able to allow the proper tension on the device is made from window shades or window blinds. So it's very low cost. We probably have about $20 in materials, maybe $20 in labor. So for around $50, you can build these hands. And that's why we're able to build multiple hands for the children to actually test, try out, give us feedback, and then we're able to put that feedback back into the new designs.
Are you working, or do you have any NGOs come to you for kids in third world countries or war zones?
We have, and actually, I didn't mention it, but we've done what we call hand-a-thon events, where it's similar to what we did at Johns Hopkins. We did this at University of Central Florida. Ivan and I met up, and we did an event with engineering students. They assembled the parts that we had printed. I'd printed 20 hands. Ivan had printed 20 hands. Another individual in the group, the Enable group, had printed 20 hands. We sent them down there. We taught engineering students from Florida how to actually put them together, and then those got shipped to a clinic in Mexico. The problem lies in the rules and regulations that surround things coming across the border, and so there's always difficulty. We have a lot of people from Syria, from the refugee camps that are interested. So yeah, thank you. So there are a lot of different people that obviously I think that we could serve. Another project I think is near and dear to my heart that I'm just getting ready to start is actually working with Wounded Warriors Foundation, with soldiers. We're working with fairings, coverings for existing prosthetic legs so that it restores the profile of the leg, because a lot of soldiers, they say, it's really demoralizing to be able to come back and people see this shaft, this aluminum shaft, or this strange loose clothing. They want something that's personalized, something unique. So that's kind of the next phase of the work that we're doing in the lab that we're getting ready to start. So I think there are so many different places. And again, this goes to prove my point that we don't even know what all these kind of creative opportunities are, because we have to find the people who are in need, and we have to identify those needs. And so the more people that hear about this, the better. That's why I've really appreciated like people saying, well, what about a pizza cutter hand for, like that's what we need. We need people that are engaged in asking those questions, so, and then solving the problems.
You want to talk a bit about like the technical part of 3D printing and the learning curve, like making sure our models are watertight and stuff?
Yeah, that's always an issue as far as when you model something, modeling it correctly. So in my courses, the first course that every student takes is just a course in 3D modeling. So they're able to create watertight models that are closed. Because basically when you print something, when you model it, you actually create what's called an STL to print from. And that STL is a very low polygon count model. And so it's basically the same, for those of you who are photographers, it would be like taking a raw image that you've modeled or you've taken and then creating a JPEG, which is much lower quality. So that's always an issue. So we're always working with making sure that the models are watertight, so that then they can be printed. There are various programs now. Autodesk has a whole suite of programs that they're using to be able to address some of those issues so that the models are good quality. Is that what you mean? Yeah? Okay.
Or like how many pieces, actually, sorry.
Yeah.
How many pieces, maybe some of
Oh, yeah. How many pieces are the hands made up of? Yeah, so you've got a gauntlet section, you've got a tensioner, so there's two there. We got to where we were making all the pins, the hinge pins, so that we don't have to use metal components. So that way in third world countries, we don't have to source hardware that we can only get here. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 parts. And it takes about 14 hours if you print a whole hand, a complete hand. Yeah, some of the printers we use are reliable enough we can print a full hand at one time. With the hands I made for the event in Florida, we actually printed on a larger Stratasys Fortis machine that can print multiple hands at once. So, yeah.
You had mentioned being able to learn CAD and other programs. Do you know any other free alternatives if someone wanted to teach themselves but didn't want to make the investment?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of free modeling programs there. Some of the popular ones for computer programs is OpenSCAD or OpenCAD. That's actually a parametric modeler, so a lot of programmers like it. Personally, I come from more the engineering side of things, so I use a program called Rhinoceros. That's what we teach. SolidWorks, all the Autodesk programs are actually, Autodesk programs is pretty amazing. You can get Fusion 360 is a very powerful program, and it right now is free if you're not using it to make money. And so anyone can go download that, and it's a cloud-based 3D modeler, fully parametric, so it's quite powerful. Onshape is a new program, makers of SolidWorks, they're plugging right now. So the original SolidWorks designers created it. So there's a lot of opportunity. Tinkercad, that's a free one. So yeah.
All right, so it's on to that. Thanks again, Frankie.
Thank you.